Thank you for listening to the BjjBrick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to the BjjBrick Podcast. This is episode 253. My name is Byron. I'm here with my good buddies Joe and Gary. One of us is known to leak a little bit when we get choked. We'll let that figure out who that is. We have an outstanding episode this week. We've got a really neat off-the-mat lesson. We've got an interview with Rafael Lovato Sr. Gary, what's happening?
Hey, can you hold up real quick? I got to go to the bathroom. I'm leaking a little bit.
Gary's the one. Yeah, it's better to armbar Gary than it is to choke him.
I'm good now, guys.
Yeah,
thanks.
Much better. But yeah, we got a great episode, jam-packed, and I interviewing Rafael Lovato Sr. was one of those things that I've wanted to do for years, and I finally connected with him, and it was worth the wait. He's such a wealth of knowledge, and he's just an open book as far as just really willing to just share what he has to offer as far as, knowledge. And we talk about some fun things that are not jiu-jitsu related, and it's just fun to kind of learn about somebody on and off the mat. So really enjoy the interview with Rafael Lovato Sr., and that's coming up in a little bit.
It's crazy, the team that Rafael Lovato Sr. and Jr. and Raider have done in Oklahoma City. You always think of the real dominating teams. You think they're either on the East or the West Coast, and it's just crazy in a little place like Oklahoma City, which is just an hour and a half away from here. But man, those guys have just developed talent, and it's from the top down. Lovato Sr. is really built an incredible team there with incredible instructors, and they're just some very, very good jiu-jitsu people.
He does get into a bit of that of the building of the team and kind of a different backstory behind Rafael Lovato Jr. From a different perspective, and it's just a great story, and he's lived a pretty wild early life, and we'll get into the interview, but he considers himself fortunate to be alive and have made it out of the situations he got himself into as a young man, or even, a child. I don't know how old he was when he was kind of getting into bad neighborhoods and that sort of thing. But yeah, just an amazing story that's coming up here in a few minutes. I have also a off the mat lesson, you guys, and this is the type of portion of the show. We'll talk about something not jiu-jitsu related, and then drag it back onto the mats, or vice versa. If we learn something on the mats, we could take it to real life and pull it back the other way. But in the interview with Rafael Lovato Sr., we talk a bit about music, and he relates that to some jiu-jitsu stuff, and that's really a neat thing. And I gotta say, go to the website. There's a picture of him playing this giant pipe organ. It's really kind of neat. It's got more keyboards than I know how to count. But one thing about music, I went to a concert that my cousin was putting on, and I remember right before they started, he took out like a little, what's it called, a tuning fork? Does that sound right? And you hit it, and it makes a little sound, and then you could turn off
sounds right.
Yeah, like that. Okay, first off, that's how much I know about music. A basic tool. But he smacked it up like on his head, and he held it up, and then he started like that was the tune or the pitch, or it kind of set him, and then he shared that with the rest of the group. Like, here's what this note is. I don't know. I don't really know. But I was thinking about that for jiu-jitsu. It seems like sometimes your best rolls aren't your first roll. They may not even be your second roll, but after you get going a little bit, and you get warmed up, and you get loosened up, you really have a couple of those really good rolls in there before you start to get tired and start to fade away in that other direction. But I do think that there are some things we could do that is almost like tuning yourself before a match, and it could just be a way to get more excited or to calm yourself down or whatever it is. And I think a lot of that we do with warming up, loosening up some stretches, and that's fine. But also, if you could do some sort of like cues like if it's a certain set of stretches, or if you kind of jump, up and down a little bit, or if you listen to a certain song. And if you do this before you train at home, your body's kind of getting tuned before you step on the mat. And I think that so many times when people go and compete, they don't have any of those things. Like the things you do before you go train at home, none of those things are there present at tournaments. And if you could just maybe switch the things you do at home to things that are easier to copy at a tournament, that would be a beneficial thing to kind of tune you up before you want to perform and perform well.
Man, that's awesome, Byron. I've heard some practitioners that know a little bit more than I do talk about that kind of stuff, and I've heard guys advocate that you should have a little ritual before you compete, and it would include maybe a mantra that you repeat in your mind, maybe the way that you tie your belt, fix your gi, a few stretches, and you do those every time before you compete. When you're in regular training, when it gets to the open mat portion and you see your training partner across the mat that you match up against with well, and you guys always go hard, you do that same routine before you roll with them, and pretty soon that routine becomes a mental cue that things are about to get real. And I'm a big proponent of that, and I think everybody should do it.
In our BJJ summer camp we had just a couple weekends ago, I was talking with one of our guests who came down from Kansas City, Mindy Ashby, and it was great to see you, Mindy. Great to meet you. But one thing she was telling me about is how she does the same warm-up every time, a little yoga warm-up, little stretching. And, I talked to her at length about that. And I told her as soon as I heal myself, I'm going to start doing her little warm-up just to get it going. And she said it's done wonders for her. And, each and every time, it's kind of like what Byron says, you're getting yourself tuned up before you tune somebody up. So I think it's a great idea.
Nice play on words there, Gary.
Yeah,
we've talked about Pavlov's dogs before, right? The scientists that trained his dogs when they heard a bell, that all of the physical things that come along with eating would begin to happen with the dogs. They start to salivate and stuff, and that's how those routines are, I think, before you compete.
Yeah, and so it doesn't have to, most commonly it's some sort of stretching or some sort of a warm-up, but even some, like, you can clap your hands 3 times or, do something like that. Or Joe was talking about just mentally framing yourself. Do that at home, too. Do that before you step on the mat to roll, and that'll help transition that over and make that a smoother thing to do while you're competing. So you're not, if I clap my hands, that'll put me, no, it won't do anything for you. Unless you've done it for 3 years, and that's right before you roll, you're going to you crack your knuckles, or you I don't know what, you do something, and it helps just condition your body to, here we go, let's do this.
It reminds me of Diego Sanchez. Joe was talking about a mantra, repeat a mantra before you step on the mat. But remember, Diego used to always do that as he was coming out to the ring, and it's something Diego did every time, and he was always ready to fight. Yeah,
wouldn't he yell the word yes over again?
Yeah,
over?
I think that's what it was. I couldn't remember the word, but yeah.
I don't know if it was anything. If anybody out there trains with Diego, I'd like to hear about that, and he'd be a fun guy to have on the show. But I think that's kind of what it was. He was just super positive. It would be intimidating for anything to be in the cage, and you have somebody walking toward you yelling yes or yelling something like, man, this guy's coming over there to beat me up.
Man, when I would watch his walk-ins just on TV as he was coming out yelling that, I was getting scared, and I'm not even there. I can imagine his opponent.
That'll make you leak a little bit, Gary.
Well, I don't have trouble with that, Byron.
Anybody who's out there is a little bit new to Jiu-Jitsu and discovering the podcast, want to invite you to check out our audiobook, Your First Year of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's really designed to get you through some of the difficult things you're going to encounter during that first year. It's $11.99. It's about 2.5 hours long. Check it out, and it's a lot. It's very similar to the podcast. It's basically just me talking to you about what to expect your first year and how to deal with that. So there'll be a link to it in the show notes. Check it out. We've got some good reviews from people, and we're glad it's helping out.
It's the time in our program. It's the time in our program where we do a quote, and this one was brought to us by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Is that how you say that, Byron?
Nailed it, Joe. I'm sure
nailed it. Good enough.
That is perfect, Joe.
I think he's related to the Van Halen brothers, but I'm not sure.
Vaughn and Van, same thing.
Anyway, his quote is, "Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Wishing is not enough. We must do." It sounds pretty simple, but I'm reading it and I'm thinking about jiu-jitsu, and I'm thinking that there's a big gulf between knowing and applying. There's a lot of moves I think I understand, but actually applying them is difficult. It takes baby steps. You got to step out of your comfort zone and move forward. That's my take on it. What do you think, Gary?
Well, man, this quote hits jiu-jitsu right on. Johann Van Halen, he really hit it. But knowing is not enough, we must apply. Wishing is not enough, we must do. And I think about jiu-jitsu. Man, there is no lying in jiu-jitsu, and not lying on the mat. We just can't lie about how good we are. We can watch all the videos we want. We can tell everybody, who won the Pan Ams, this year, what move that is. But you must do it. You have to get on the mat. You're not going to get a belt unless you can apply that against a resisting opponent. We're not just going to go through some katas and just say you know how to do it. You have to be able to do it against a resisting opponent. There is no lying. We must do. There's more than just knowing. We talk about people who are book smart versus people who are street smart. The guys on the jiu-jitsu mat, the world champions, they're book and street smart. They got the street smarts. They got a PhD in street smarts. PhD in book smarts. But they got the whole package going.
Yeah, you can wish you had that next belt all day long, but if you don't get on the mat and put in the work, you know what they say: wish in one hand and spit in the other, and see which one fills up faster.
I've heard it a little bit different than that.
You do have to spit in one hand, though, so you could start leaking.
Leaking out a little early.
But the first part of this quote, knowing is not enough, we must apply. That's the difference. When you learn the technique, let's just say, Joe taught us how to do the sweep today, and we do it, 10 times, 20 times. We do it an hour. And then we go and we roll. I should be thinking about that sweep. I should be trying to get in position to execute that sweep. And that's why I really do celebrate when a teammate of mine, or if I can pull off the move of the day, great. But I don't really celebrate that as much. But when Joe shows me a sweep and they do that sweep to me, I am so happy. Like, A, you tried it, and B, it worked. Like that, you're doing the technique. So it's, I think a lot of times people kind of just peter out with, okay, yeah, I feel like I know this technique now, I got it. Well, you don't actually know it good enough to perform it while we're rolling. I can almost guarantee you that, because the whole room will do techniques for a little while, and then the people kind of peter out, and that's understandable. But not many of those people are doing that technique when it comes to rolling. And I think you must apply the technique to your actual jiu-jitsu with a training partner in order to actually have that little bit deeper knowledge and bring it into your game. Because you could know about it. I know how to do Kimura. I know the ideas behind it. I know all this stuff. But in practice, I don't have a very good Kimura.
Byron, are you guys messing with me? First you're talking about leaking, and now within one, Byron talking, he talks about petering out twice.
Old guy problems, Gary.
Gary's always a little paranoid we're messing with him.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Like last, I think it was
Byron,
yeah.
Byron, you were talking about celebrating, how you celebrate. And I do want to call you out on that. Byron's talking about he celebrates when one of his teammates, but Byron said he's not a big celebrator. That is totally false.
Okay.
I tell you, if you roll with Byron and he hits a submission on you, he's going to jump up. He's going to scream at the top of the lungs. He's going to start doing the moonwalk, a couple of cartwheels up and down the mat, and he's going to let everybody know about it. And so Byron, he will celebrate when he taps you out.
It's not quite as big as Gary's celebration. Gary has these little cannons that go off and shoot confetti in the air. And that sounds simple. Okay. But he's got to have somebody that man these confetti cannons.
So, okay, we're talking about leaking, petering out, and it's the cannon supposed to be coming from the backside of me, Byron.
Oh man, no,
and is that really confetti?
Kind of the kinds you see at like a big football game or a basketball game, or something like that.
Yeah,
that's really what it meant, Gary.
But no, that is an awesome quote. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe.
Yep. Always giving us good quotes from Johann. We don't want to keep you from the interview any longer, so here we go with Rafael Lovato Sr. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
He does the berimbolo while passing your guard. He is known for a lightning-fast gi choke that he only does in no-gi. His triangle choke has 4 sides. One of his cauliflower ears was eaten by a vegetarian.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BjjBrick Podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm excited to bring Rafael Lovato Sr. to the podcast. We've had Junior on the show a while back, and I'm happy to get you on the show. Rafael Lovato Sr., welcome to the BjjBrick Podcast.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I always like talking to different competitors and then also talking to coaches, and you've got a lot of experience with helping people discover jiu-jitsu and get better at jiu-jitsu and get amazing at jiu-jitsu. And so I know we're going to have a great conversation today. If somebody, and I don't know who they would be, but is a little unfamiliar with you, can you give us a little summary of who you are and what you're up to?
Yes, of course, Rafael Lovato Sr., and grew up in Chicago and began my passion for martial arts really at a very, very young age. I was a wannabe gangbanger right on the southwest side of Chicago. And I often tell people 2 things. One, while it may not sound very popular, but I mean this with all my heart, and I'm very, very serious about this. One, I'm a walking proof. I tell people I'm living, walking, breathing proof there is a God, because I should have been killed a long time ago or end up in prison. But the second thing is I'm an example of the benefits of training in martial arts, because I realized that discipline and the sacrifice, the focus that it required to be good in martial arts was much greater than just being a punk kid and getting in trouble. So, but yeah, I started when I was very young, and then started formal training in traditional martial arts when I was 14. But I always considered myself a boxer, and through the years, I've been very fortunate to train with some of the greats. I trained in Kali Eskrima, Arnis, with Dan Onosano, Richard Basile, Kakoi Kenyete. I trained Muay Thai with Chai Sirasut, several others, and as well as I've even done Penchak Silat with Paul de Tours, and of course the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which has become, I'm the kind of guy, I enjoy sport Jiu-Jitsu. I enjoy even getting out there and competing, but I've always liked the MMA aspect. So, that's really my favorite part. I like the striking in conjunction with the grappling, the clinching, the throwing, and I admire the skill to be able to put it all together.
Well, we've got a lot already on the table here. I want to go back just a little bit, and you talked about, being a young, really a boy, and up against some tremendous odds, and the fact that you made it out of that alive is a testament to God. How does that affect you as somebody who's running an academy, who's coaching kids and helping young people? When you see young children, all children, when you see children come in and who may be having tough times at home or in the neighborhood?
Yes. I believe there's good in every child, and it's unfortunate that maybe their circumstances are not the best. But I've seen children that were very unsure of themselves, and maybe needed that extra boost to gain that self-assurance, not arrogance. I've never liked that. I've always discouraged that. Not arrogance or cockiness, but being confident, self-assured, and to reach goals. Because I've always emphasized, set realistic goals for yourself, maybe small goals at first, and then you start to challenge yourself by reaching for higher goals. But I've seen that happen, especially with young children. And if they're in a positive, constructive environment with other like-minded children, good coaches, then it's amazing how far they can go. In fact, our children's program here is one of the best, and we have some awesome competitors. It's amazing when you're seeing a little 10-year-old doing really complicated spider guard moves. And so they're very, very capable of learning. And, of course, we always emphasize being a gentleman or a gentlewoman, being a good sport, being respectful, courteous, looking someone in the eye and responding to them. When I was growing up, of course, this is back in the 60s, when there was a lot of racism, a lot of violence. There was so many bad things going on. But I had a few good mentors in my life that taught me, hey, you look someone in the eyes, you show them respect, you answer, yes, sir, no, ma'am, whatever. You don't just get respect because you're a minority or because of the color of your skin or because of your home life. You have to earn respect. And I think martial arts is a great catalyst for developing those social skills as well as physical skills, as well as those intrinsic personal challenges that we all have. And that's one of the things I've admired so much about training in martial arts.
Tell me a little bit about your first martial arts coach and how they helped you as a child.
Well, I'll never forget. Here again, I'm just a punk kid, and I had a friend. I'll never forget him. His name was Dwayne Sides, and Dwayne was taking Taekwondo. And, of course, I was boxing at the time and, thought of myself as a boxer. And Dwayne and I would get together and basically just beat each other up. And he finally talked me into going to this martial arts school with him. And this is the honest truth. I'll never forget. I walked into the school, and he introduced me to the instructor, who was a big man. His name was Dwayne Worley, and I'll never forget him. But I introduced myself to Mr. Worley, and I said, yeah, my name is Rafael Lovato. In 1 year, I'll be better than anybody you have here. And he just looked at me. And for a minute there, I thought he was going to hit me. But then he kind of laughed, and he says, okay, prove it to me. Well, I think I surprised him because of my focus. I was very, very disciplined. And I remember I would get up I would get my brother, my sister up, my whole family, in fact. I'd get up in the morning around 4:30, 5 o'clock, go for a run, and I would shadow box, jump rope. I was working out, and when I joined the school, I was usually the first one there and the last one to leave. In fact, he would have to just tell me, "Hey, kid, go home, get out of here." But 1 year later, I was one of his enforcers. And there was a couple of guys, I was one of them, that we were always the guys to, someone came in from another school or, at tournaments or whatever, we were the ones. But he turned out to be a great father figure to me. My own father died tragically when I was just a baby, but he was like a father figure to me, a great man who to this day I'll never forget. He was so good to me in directing me, giving me good positive direction, and then definitely helping with my training.
That's an interesting story, and to think about how you talked about giving kids confidence, but not letting them be arrogant with their self-esteem. And,
yes.
And you walk in as a little punk kid, arrogant. Yeah, I'm going to be the best there is in a short amount of time.
Yes.
And he somehow he could have taken that away from you and just, like you said,
oh, yes.
like just yes. destroyed you in the ring, and it would have been over there. But he changed that arrogance to confidence and ended up helping you a ton.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. But, through him, of course, I've met many others and had some great training partners. Of course, as a kid, I remember when the Green Hornet came out. And I remember my mother saying, "Hey, you want to see Kato?" And I'm like, yeah, of course. And remember watching the Green Hornet. That's when I decided, man, I've got to do that. And tragically, I Of course, Bruce died in 1973. I almost got to meet him. He came to Chicago one time in near my area, and we went to go see him because he would travel with the show, doing little demonstrations, signing autographs and all that, and travel with the Batmobile and the Black Beauty and all that stuff. Well, we had just missed him. He had just left. But I got to see all the other stuff. But I was so determined as I got older to meet him and train with him. But I got to do the next best thing and train with many of his old students and friends from, of course, Dan Osano, Richard Castillo, Ted Wong, Herb Jackson, Jerry Petit, all those guys. And had some great training sessions with them and spent a lot of time. Eventually got certified through Richard Castillo, who was a former boxer himself, and became another great mentor and friend, and of course tragically died a little over a year ago. But got to do the next best thing. And so yeah, it's been a long, fun road of training and meeting some really tremendous martial artists.
That's kind of the starting point of your early martial arts career. But
yes,
when did jiu-jitsu come in the picture, and how'd that happen?
All of us instructors that were affiliated and certified with Richard Castillo, every year we had an instructors conference, and we would have to go to Los Angeles. And Richard went first class with us. We had great training. He would bring in guest instructors. We each would make presentations. It was a nonstop, week-long series of training, networking, everything from business to CPR to marketing to training with different people. And then at the end of this, there would be a great party or a luau, and a lot of guys would bring the wives out on that weekend, and we would all have a great time. Well, in one of these conferences, he brought the Machado brothers, and I remember Carlos and let's see, it was Roger and I believe Jean-Jacques. Yes, Jean-Jacques was there, and I remember. They come in with these gis, and of course we're all JKD guys, and we don't wear gis, but they began showing some technique, and I thought, you know what, this is interesting. And then we started doing these, going through these techniques. Then at toward the end, they got down on the mat and they sparred every one of us. And I remember the helpless, hopeless feeling I had sparring around. I sparred with Carlos, the oldest brother. And consequently, Carlos and I kind of developed a friendship. And so I started going and training with them. I remember that I think I stayed an extra couple of days or something and went to their academy. And also in that time period, I also got to meet Hickson Gracie and train with him. And this is back in the days when, a lot of times he'd come to the school to just teach the classes himself. He'd jump right on the mat. I actually got to drill with him and spar with him. And, between him, Carlos, and so many of those other great jiu-jitsu guys, that was some of the best times I ever had getting my butt kicked, But it was just an amazing time of learning and training. So that's how I was introduced to jiu-jitsu. So after that, I used to go to L.A. I would travel to L.A. at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, and I would spend a week, sometimes even 2 weeks, and just train nonstop. And then one day, Carlos Machado called me and says, "Hey, Rafael, guess what? I'm moving to Dallas." And so I was really excited because him and Chuck Norris are good friends, and Chuck invited him to come to Dallas to start teaching there. So for 6 years, I would drive every Thursday morning. I'd get up probably around 4:30. I would drive to Dallas, do a private lesson with Carlos, stay and do his beginning class, his advanced class, and then usually after the training, we would go to lunch, and I would be picking his brain, and then come back, and I would share all this information with Rafael, and we would drill and train, and I did that for 6 years. And then, of course, when I drove back, I would teach my own classes. So it was pretty exhausting, but it was a great time of learning. And to this day, Carlos is another one of those people that I'll always admire and always be grateful for his instruction. And in fact, in my own training, to this day, I still do many things that I learned from him years ago.
What were you doing like for work at the time that you were able to drive that much and spend that much time training?
Well, we, of course, grew up in Chicago, and I, in a trip one time when I was a kid, I met another gentleman who was from Oklahoma City, and he was a very good martial artist in and of his own right. And he invited me to come out and visit one time, and so I came to Oklahoma City and eventually met my future wife. And well, she is from here, and so anyway, we get married, but we lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. We were there for almost 10 years. That's in fact where Rafael was born. And I was going to school there, and I was pursuing another one of my passions, which is music. But I was also an assistant instructor at the Cincinnati Colley Academy. But we decided to move back here to Oklahoma City, be closer to her family. And when we came here, I told her, look, I really want to start my own school. And my wife, being the great woman she is, in August we'll be celebrating our 37th anniversary. She was fully supportive, and so I started the school here. It was pretty rough. There was a lot of sacrifices that had to be made, but that's what I was doing. I was teaching and running the school, and fortunately would have guys that would help me out, that would cover classes for me, things like that, while I was traveling.
Wow, tremendous attitude towards learning and getting better, and obviously that was important, and you're fortunate to have that. What is that, about a 4-hour drive, 3-hour drive from Oklahoma City?
Yes, to Dallas, yes, about 3 hours. And so, yeah, driving there and getting there in time to train with Carlos and do the class. It was an all-morning event. And by the time after lunch, I would leave probably around sometimes around 2:30, something like that, and get here and then jump right into my own class. But it was well worth it, worth it.
And I think it's hard for some people to understand. Back then, that's how you would learn. I mean, you couldn't throw it, go to YouTube or throw a DVD in by somebody who was a world-class competitor. You had to go meet the people and get on the mat with them.
Yes. Back then, it was L.A., Florida, Miami. My goodness, if you back, I'm talking early 90s, mid 90s, if you heard of a guy that was a purple belt, that was like, wow, really? Oh man, you sought him out, you wanted to train with him and learn everything you can. But in fact, I remember buying the entire 11 tape VHS tape series from Renzo Gracie and Craig Kukuk. And, honestly, when I would learn, every day I would pick up Rafael from school, and unless he had a big test or something like that, he and I would spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours together. It was just our time, and we would experiment, drill, and I would show him what I learned, and he was watching I remember the Renzo tapes, and then we would start to develop, hey, well, maybe we can do this, we can do that, or maybe if we try this grip, or maybe go about it from this direction, or whatever. And we just, for the longest time, he and I we would bounce techniques off of each other. And of course, it was a great time because, it was a great way to bond with him. And then, of course, he would go home and eat a little something, and then come back for class, and then go home and do homework and all that stuff.
Yeah. And how important was it for you as a father that he did jiu-jitsu or some martial art?
Oh, he had to do it. I joke with people that, they ask, well, when did he start training? Well, he started when he was in the womb. I joke with people, when he was born, the doctor smacked him. He punched the doctor, and then choked out the assistant, But he was around us his whole life. When we were in Cincinnati, he was very little, and he would go to the gym with me, and he would be right next to me working out. I would always go early to do some bag work, do some cardio work before I had my class. And I never would get onto him, I always would try to encourage him. And the only time I would really watch him and correct him is if he was doing something where he could injure himself. Because my idea was I wanted him to associate this with fun. And if I was just constantly belittling him or correcting him, I didn't want it to discourage him. But my two primary goals for him were good exercise habits and to be able to defend himself should he have to. And that was it. I never told him, hey, you got to compete. I never did that. He's the one that wanted. And then that changed everything. When he told me he wanted to compete, then the training got a little more intense and got more focused. But he was always so driven. Again, I never had to force him. He did it all on his own. And I would just help him and encourage him the best I could.
I think that's a lot of wisdom as a guy trying to bring up your son and really focus on enjoying it and teaching good exercise habits and self-defense. Yes. If you push too hard, sometimes it's hard to enjoy something that you're being pushed real hard on.
Yeah, it backfires. And you turn them away, and then they don't want to have anything to do with it, So, in fact, in Cincinnati, his first formal classes were actually with one of the other instructors because I knew I would be too hard on him. So I had one of the other guys start teaching him formally. In fact, I still have his very first certificate of rank that he received when he was 5 years old. And I remember the instructor telling me that he actually, at 5 years old, learned faster and was more technical than many of his adult students that had been doing the training for a while. So he always had this natural ability, this gift and talent for the martial arts. And of course, when he was very little, he was so awkward, but he never would give up. He would always try. He couldn't jump rope, but he would always try to jump rope. I would run with one of my training partners around a high school track, and he was so little. I'm talking 4 or 5 years old, but he would never give up. He always tried, and so he still has that drive and that discipline.
Yeah, and focusing on getting to enjoy it. It's
yes.
From my perspective, I've never raised a world-class athlete, but you could push real hard and really hammer them and get them to become that type of an athlete. But if you expose them to the joys and the excitement and a passion for it, they'll do that on their own.
Yes.
So some of them will anyway. And he sounds like one of those kids that once he began to love it, he wanted to become as good as he could. And
yes, absolutely.
So when did you see, either as a father or a coach, something different about him? Because there are hundreds, probably thousands of coaches around that have their kids doing jiu-jitsu, and some of them think, yeah, my child will become one of the best in the world. But most of them are pretty realistic, and they have the goals of enjoyment and fitness and self-defense and that sort of thing. But when did you kind of see something different about him?
Well, I actually could see it when he was very young, because his never give up attitude. And I could sense that there was something different there. There was, and I'll tell you something else too. My wife and I, to this day, we think of him, he's our miracle baby. We almost lost him. He was premature. And at 5 months old, we almost lost him. He almost died. He had a very, very serious case of the croup. And I remember just, my goodness, that feeling of, your child in the hospital and intensive care and these tubes everywhere, and what a hopeless, helpless feeling. And somehow, thank God, he came through that. And, I could just sense that something about him. He was always very goal-oriented. I never had to force him into anything. And I remember, too, when he was really young, I remember in his room, he had a board where he would write down his goals. And I remember actually a friend of ours coming by one time, and Rafael wanted to show him his room with all his posters and swords and knives and all this martial arts paraphernalia. And this friend of ours saw that board, and there was a list of goals that he had. Winning the Nationals, being a world champion, winning the Pan Ams, winning the Europeans, all these different goals. And I remember my friend saying to him, "Hey, Rafael, you don't think you're setting yourself up for disappointment, do you? Do you think maybe you're shooting a little too high?" And very, very resolutely, Rafael says, "No, I'm not. I'm going to do that." And sure enough, he has. He's done all that and more. And I actually could see that when I was very young, because when other kids were doing, typical kid things, we wanted him to have fun, and I think he did. We would do things and that, were a lot of fun, different activities. We would take vacations, but he was also always determined. He always had that goal, that mindset, that one day I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I don't want to be, like I often tell my students, who trains to be mediocre? Who lives to be mediocre? Who says, hey, I want to be the most normal, the most average person in the world? There has to be this idea of excellence. We have to try to strive to be something more than what we're capable of doing. And somehow Rafael has always had that. So all I try to do is just to try to develop it and try to encourage it. But he's always had that.
You talked a little bit about being interested in the MMA aspect of jiu-jitsu. Why is that?
Well, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I look to my roots, where I grew up. I grew up in Chicago, where there was, unfortunately, violence constantly. In fact, just recently, after Rafael's last fight in Chicago against the very tough Gerald Harris, we got to spend some family time there in Chicago, and I took him to my old neighborhood where I grew up. And, I was flooded with all these memories and these emotions, because I remember literally, oftentimes I ran to school and I ran back home because, I had to worry about this gang or this group of guys or this. So in other words, I know what works and I know what doesn't work, and I hate to say this, I love jiu-jitsu, I love sports jiu-jitsu, but I don't care what kind of, how great your spider guard is. Try doing that on the street in restrictive clothing, in gym shoes, or in a business suit, on the sidewalk with glass or gravel or bricks or, other things in the way, in a landing of an apartment building. Try doing that. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. So the other thing is, when I ran my school all these years, I had of course, an application and a questionnaire that people would have to fill out. And one of the questions I asked was, why do you wish to study martial arts? No one ever responded, I want to be a world champion or a national champion or world champion, whatever. No one ever said that. No one. What they said was one of two things. One, I want to be in better shape. Two, I want to be able to defend myself, my family, should I have to. So I was always interested in what works, what's realistic. I don't want the flash and, the fancy stuff. I want what works. I love sports jiu-jitsu, and I always advocate get out there and try to compete. At least do it one time. You have to have those butterflies. Look across the mat at someone else and test yourself against that person. That's good for you. But ultimately, I think we're all more concerned with, the street. There's no rules, no referees, no time limits, no age or weight categories. It's for real. And there's no honor. And so that's why, to me, MMA is most closely resembles that. And to tell you the truth, I remember when I was a kid, I was like 15, 16 years old. Back then, we didn't have the 4-ounce MMA gloves like today. Back then, I remember those Tempo gloves, Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon. And I remember I had those gloves. I had some baseball shin pads or some foam shin pads. The equipment back then wasn't anything like it is now. But I remember I would get guys, and I'd say, hey, look, no hard feelings, nothing personal, but I want you to try to take my head off. And these guys were street fighters, good street fighters, boxers. And one time, this is the honest truth, I even got the high school wrestling coach to come and spar with me. And we went at it. And so back then, I'm talking, my goodness, 73, 74, in that time frame, I was doing MMA. I didn't know it was called MMA, but I was doing MMA. And we would go at it, and I learned a lot from that. And I remember going with a high school wrestling coach, great guy, and I remember I bloodied him up, and I remember him taking me down and introducing me to a world that I had never been in before, and that was my first introduction to, wow, what happens when you're on the ground with a big guy who's got that man strength, and he's wailing away at you. And so, I understand the, we can't, of course, there has to be rules. But like I said, in my opinion, MMA most closely resembles safely a real fight. That's why I like it so much.
Looking at jiu-jitsu and MMA, part of, I think, jiu-jitsu's issues with self-defense is that we train to deal with other jiu-jitsu people. And it was just last night we were teaching a side control technique, and there was, the guy underhooks, and what are you going to do if he's underhook and you're on top? And I was talking to a guy who's pretty new, and I was saying, new people don't underhook like that because they don't know that could be a good thing for them. So that's not like this technique, although it's basic, it's versus a jiu-jitsu person, or maybe versus a wrestler.
Yes.
It's versus somebody who's just kind of trying hard, but they don't know what to do. And I think of a lot of the techniques that we have in jiu-jitsu are to solve other problems that jiu-jitsu is presenting us.
Exactly. And not only that, not only does it apply in jiu-jitsu, but many other martial arts. Why do you think there's so many different martial arts? Well, for example, with Chinese martial arts, many of them are for defense against another person doing the same martial arts. And then all of a sudden you get someone that does something completely different. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, wow, he wasn't supposed to respond that way. So while I don't advocate violence at all, I also believe that, like I tell people, having these skills is like having insurance. You hope you never need it, but it's nice knowing it's there. And I remember when I ran the school, of course, I turned it over to Rafael a few years ago, but my students, we had a curriculum that I developed, and they had to know the movements, the techniques with a gi and perform them, but they also had to train in striking. And of course, being a boxer, a Muay Thai guy, everyone had to have at least the rudimentary skills of basic striking. So they had to learn the basic punches in boxing, footwork, stance, Muay Thai, knees, elbows, kicks, clinching, takedowns, dealing with the plum position, the Muay Thai clinch, or, wrestler's clinch. So in the test, it was a grueling, exhausting affair, because when they finally tested for the blue belts, they, of course, had to perform the technique on the curriculum. Then they would have to spar with different people according to, their ability, their age. There might be some limitations. So I never pushed anyone beyond what I knew they could do. But they would have to spar people with a gi. And then at the end, then the real fun started. The gis came off, the MMA gloves came on, shin pads, and you got to do MMA. And that was what I required. I respect the sport aspect. I think it's a lot of fun. It's great. But come on, a lot of these guys that do it, in all honesty, they couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. One time you get punched in the face, it changes everything. And you just need to know how to deal with that. That's my personal philosophy on that. And I feel like sometimes we kind of are losing that and getting away from it. And we forget reality, the street, what happens in the real world. I used to do what we called environmental training. I got that from Dan Onosano. I would have the guys together, and maybe I might just throw some focus mitt on the mat at random, some focus mitts or tie pads, and say, hey, that's a rock, or that's a bottle on the street. You get near that, hey, what's to say the guy couldn't pick that up and smash you in the head? Of course, my training in Kali, I do a lot with edge weapons, impact weapons, and I've also done a lot with firearms. So I like to deal with that. There would be days when we would have a class, and I would have everybody in street clothes, and just clothes, old clothes. Maybe go to the Salvation Army and get something that they didn't care if it got torn up, and we get on the mat. Yes, with the shoes and everything, because the mats can always be cleaned later on. And we would do some sparring in different situations with street clothes on. We would even do things with multiple opponents and different drills, and have a lot of fun with that. But to me, that was far more important than just the sport aspect. To tell you the truth, I could care less about 50-50 or berimbolo or any of that kind of stuff. That doesn't exist in the real world.
Well, and a lot of those positions are dealing with other high-level grapplers, because the odds of you bumping into that guy and upsetting him in the mall or the club are pretty slim.
Yes, exactly.
You also mentioned that you would recommend people compete at least once, just to get out there and do it. Mm-hmm. When is a good time to do that?
Well, nowadays there's always a local tournament. Just get out there and try some of these smaller tournaments. Maybe do a couple of those, and then get out there and try the Pan Ams or the Nationals, or even the Worlds. Get out there and try. But if you want, just start off with some of the smaller local tournaments, because there's something to be said about going out there. And, you're abiding by a certain set of rules, but still it is a martial art. It does involve tactics, strategy, your physical attributes, your mental fortitude. So it does involve that. And I think, and I've always told my students, hey, if and I know some guys, some great jiu-jitsu guys, that they just don't care for competition. And, but they will get out there and at least try it. And I think it's good for everyone to get out there and at least try it. Get out there and test yourself. But by all means, get with good people and spar, train, drill on the mat, have fun with that. And but no, I do like it, and I think it's good.
Would you think somebody needs to be trained for 6 months or a year, or a certain amount of exposure before they get out there and compete, or as soon as possible?
Everybody is different. Some people are just natural athletes. I've seen guys, with just 6 months of training and get out there and, jump in a beginning division and just dominate, do really, really well. And then there's, that person like myself, who's just a normal average person who doesn't have that natural ability to learn as fast. Sometimes, for them, it may take a little bit longer. You don't want them to jump in there and just be discouraged. You want them to feel like, and like I always tell my students, hey, you're already a winner. You're a champion just for getting out there and trying. Because, there's always those people that can talk and say, oh, yeah, well, you should have done this, or I would have done that, or this. Well, you get out there and do it, okay? You're already, I think you've already proved something by just stepping out there and trying. There's a lot to be said for that. I remember way back, I think it was 94, 95, when I had the pleasure of bringing Royler Gracie out to my school. And I was the first one to bring the Gracies here to Oklahoma, to the state of Oklahoma, first one to bring the Machados, and I've had many, many others. But Royler, he was also going to another state, so he got to spend like 4 days here. So I spent a lot of time with him, talking to him. And I'll never forget what he told me one time. One day we were out, I think we had some lunch, and I said to him, it must have been tough growing up and being a Gracie. Whenever you got out there and competed, there had to be so much pressure on you. And he said something to me that was truly astounding. He says, no, there was no pressure at all. My dad told me that if I won, he would give me $10. If I lost, he would give me $20. And I'll never forget that, because the emphasis, and this is what I always try to convey to Rafael, the emphasis was on learning and doing your best. Not necessarily winning, but learning and doing your best. And I've always tried to convey that to, like I said, Rafael and all my students. Just get out there and try, do your best, and learn from it.
Wow, that's I've heard that story before, and that's a great attitude to have, especially when you're competing and it's fairly new to you. And I think people think they're going to win, and half of the people in a bracket are going to lose the first match, and all but one of them will have a loss by the time it's over.
Yep. That's right.
I remember, I don't know if it was probably 2004. You guys were having, I live in Kansas, and you guys were having tournaments there in Oklahoma City, and it was a great opportunity.
Yeah. So we do those like about every 6 months.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun with that. And and that was one way to, of course, there were no tournaments around back then, only the big ones, through the IBJJF. And so I started doing these tournaments just to give my students the opportunity, and quite frankly, quite honestly, to give my son the opportunity to get out there and compete, because he always competed, always.
I remember I signed up for, I think it was a no-gi tournament or division. I don't know which, if you mix them both up then, but I signed up for intermediate. I think I was maybe a blue belt, and I wanted to do intermediate, and we got called in, and you told us as a group, there's not enough people for intermediate, so we're going to have beginner and advanced. And you and I had a short conversation about where I would go, and you said, did you come here to have a good match, or did you come here to try to win a medal? And it changed my perspective on what I was doing, because I really wanted to win. But the way you explained it to me, I really wanted to have a good match and also win. I didn't want to beat somebody who didn't belong in the same division as me. So I bumped up to advance. I think I lost by a point or two, but I had a great time. And I remember that the attitude towards my competition is, I came here for the toughest match I can get. And it was in the advanced division, as I had a year or two on the mats, and I had a good time, and I learned that lesson from you early on.
How about that? Well, I'm sorry to say I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Good experience. Man, how about that?
Yeah, you were very busy, and it was just a conversation you had with one of the, I don't know, a couple hundred competitors that you had on, that you were working with, and you were making brackets and working with people, and I was like, well, he's right. I did come here to have a good match. If I wanted to just win, that's not what I'm looking for. I want to get better, and it changed my perspective on that. And those tournaments were great back then.
Yeah, those were the days. Oh my goodness, I remember those.
I remember, and I don't think it was the same tournament, maybe a different one, when Junior got his black belt in front of everybody, and that was really amazing. Yes, I'll never forget that. Yes, it was just a year after I got mine. And that was really special because, of course, not only did he get his black belt, but we became the first American father and son black belts. And he was also the youngest American to ever get a black belt. Wow. What was it like getting your black belt?
Oh, it was amazing, yes. Likewise with me, it was in Dallas at a tournament. And I had a lot of my students, it was a huge tournament, a lot of my students competing. But Carlos Machado had several of us get together and did a beautiful ceremony. I remember the place was packed. It was a huge gym, and I forget just how many people were there, but it was packed. And Carlos presented me with my black belt, and it was a very, very daunting and just a very overwhelming experience. I was really pleased, but I'll never forget the feeling I had. I felt like, wow. Now I'm in graduate school. I finally got my bachelor's. Now I'm in graduate school. Now I have to really, really train and really study. And so it was a very, very humbling experience, but it was very, very special.
Wow, that's really cool. A couple of things I wanted to get to talk to you about. You mentioned music as another passion of yours.
Yes.
Any similarities or anything you could learn from the music world and take it on the mats, or vice versa?
Oh, a lot of similarities. First of all, I am a classically trained musician. That was one of the main, in fact, the primary reason why we went to Cincinnati, Ohio. I worked for the archdiocese there. Believe it or not, I play a big, huge, massive pipe organ. So I played for the church, and I also directed a volunteer as well as a professional choir, a handbell choir. Special occasions, I would have a brass quintet or a string quartet. So, in other words, I play Bach or Franck or Vidor. I'm playing Brahms, some very, very serious and linear music. And I will make a confession. While I love jiu-jitsu, and I'm very grateful for the people I've met through this journey of training in martial arts. I love the fact, I'm 60 years old now, but, compared to other 60-year-olds, my goodness, I'm in so much better shape. But I will say that music is my real, true passion, because for me, when I play music, it is a form of worship to me. I don't just play. I don't just go through the motions. I never perform just another gig. I don't even like that word, especially related with classical music. It's not another gig for me. I don't do certain music that a lot of other organists will refer to as flash and trash, something that sounds really flashy, but, it's just simple to do and get some oohs and ahs and then just go on. No, every piece of music I play is special to me. And like I said, it is an absolute form of worship for me personally. I've been very privileged. In fact, I just returned from Toronto, Canada, where I taught a seminar at our good friend and Rafael's Muay Thai coach, Mauricio Amado. And I was very privileged to get to play the largest pipe organ in all of Canada. And then I also played at the Episcopal Cathedral there, and was actually even invited by one of the assistant ministers that, hey, you should come back and do a concert for us. And I do occasionally do recitals, and I'm very involved with Oklahoma City University here. And then also, just a couple of months ago, I was in Spain. I enjoy going there. My best friends are there, and I go as often as I can. I also got to play in the huge, massive cathedral of Cordoba, which can seat over 40,000 people in this cathedral. And so that, like I said, is really special to me. Now, the similarities, you think about this. With music, you're performing. When you get out there and compete, you're performing. You have to prepare and practice. I know when I played and I've had special services or I have a recital, I have to spend hours and hours drilling and training, practicing. In fact, oftentimes I have to take maybe just one or two measures of a particular passage that's very, very difficult, and I have to go over it and over it and over it and over it until my fingering is perfect. And of course, with the pipe organ, you get involved with your feet, because you've got 32 pedals that you have to play. You have expression pedals. You have pistons or buttons you have to push constantly while you're playing, or the draw knobs that you have to pull or push. So it involves a lot. It involves tremendous focus. The pipe organ is called the king of instruments because it's not only the most powerful, it's also the most difficult to play. So you think about that. You're getting ready for a big match. You have to drill constantly. Oh man, I keep getting caught in this one bad position, or I get caught in this one submission. Why? You have to analyze and drill it over and over until you're confident that you're not going to get caught there again. When you go and perform in music, hey, we're only human. Sometimes we have a bad performance. Sometimes we have a great performance, just like in jiu-jitsu. Sometimes we're off a little bit. Sometimes there's other things in our mind. We're not completely focused. Same thing with music. So the similarities are very, very much the same. Now, for practical purposes, obviously when I train, my jiu-jitsu is very different because I'm always concerned about my fingers. So I do grips differently. If someone is going to break my grip, I let them have it because I don't want to hurt my fingers. Also, I re-grip a lot. So I do some very, very unusual things. Certain chokes, like the Bravo choke, I do it totally different. So that way I don't have to switch grips so much or feed the lapel so much where I'm going to take a chance of jamming fingers. So I've got some really weird and rather, if I say so myself, some innovative ways of doing grips just because I'm concerned about my fingers.
Wow, you're explaining all this stuff about music and all that, and it didn't even occur to me that you would alter your training to protect what you're doing with your music. And
absolutely.
I think you would be a great.
Honestly, I have a practice instrument in my house, and then I have a number of pipe organs here available to me in Oklahoma City. So I'm there constantly. Every day I try to practice for at least several hours, and then I go and I play, and every day I'm at the bench. So I'm always concerned about that, and like I said, I've adjusted the training for that.
Have you had many issues with either grappling or striking arts affecting your ability to play?
No, just one time I'll never forget. I remember I was with Carlos, and it was in a class, and he was training, and he mentioned, "Hey, Rafael, why don't you train with this guy?" And he mentioned his name, but I thought he was a Brazilian guy, and he was wearing a white belt. And so I remember I went and I said hello to him. I said, "Hey, you want to train with me?" But I said it to him in Portuguese, and he looked at me kind of funny. And so we started training, and I made a very, very big mistake, but I learned a valuable lesson that day. He was no white belt. This guy, I could tell immediately by the way he was moving, and he started moving really, really hard. And at one point threw me so hard that my thumb bent back and actually touched my wrist. So at that point, I got a little upset, and because he was going so hard, and I got him in a triangle. I remember I was really working on that triangle to get him to tap, and Carlos stepped in. And I found out later on this guy was like undefeated, 13 years Iranian national wrestling champion. But I remember like for months, I couldn't even tie my belt. That's the only time I ever really messed up a finger. But, fortunately it healed up and I was okay. But that's been the only time.
Wow. I think of many jobs. I mean, you could have a surgeon or an artist, or there's a lot of things when you need your hands to be in very good working order in order to do
yes. them.
And I think that the things you've learned over the years. I don't know if I was a surgeon, which I'm certainly not. I would be looking at coming to spend some time and learning. Okay, how do I protect my hands while I'm doing this to make sure I'm able to do both jiu-jitsu and make a living at the same time. And
right.
I think that like the years you've accumulated of doing this and being smart about it, that's a tremendous resource. But you mentioned if you got a grip and you see someone going to break it, you just let go. You let them have it. You don't like to.
Yeah, I let go.
Any other big tips you have for? I mean, just specifically hands, protecting your hands and protecting your fingers.
Well, taping them is of course good. But just be careful. Always be careful. And one thing too, I have learned, especially as I've gotten older, is now I'm very selective of the people that I train with. Of course, we were all beginners at one time, but of course, as you know, when you're a beginner, you don't have the technique, so you rely many times on what you do have or what you do know, and that is your strength or your speed or that simple desire to survive a situation. So consequently, a lot of times you get explosive or moves erratically, and then the other person who is going very technical and trying to be nice and just train, they get hurt. So nowadays, I just train. I train with Rafael. We still have our time. Now it's kind of reversed. He's helping out the old man, and so he and we train usually every Thursday morning, and we try to train a couple of times, but definitely on Thursday mornings. And he and I will get down and just roll together, spar, and have fun. Because, of course, his technique is flawless, and he knows, about my music and all that. But I've got some other guys here. We've got some really good black belts, good brown and purple belts that I like to get down and roll around with, because I don't have to worry about that. My days of proving anything are over. I don't have to prove anything at all. I just want to have fun, train, help people if I can. One of my greatest joys is just to, help students out, show maybe something and if they come back and say, hey, that really helped, or wow, that, what a difference that made, man, that makes you feel so good. But the other thing is too, I would always tell my students, I love aphorisms. And one of them, my favorite ones was, I would tell my students, to train 50% for their partner and 50% for themselves, and you both improve 100%. So leave the ego outside, because we're all a team. Train with each other to help each other. If so-and-so catches me sometime, you don't have to get mad. I never allow people to curse or throw a mouthpiece or stomp off the mat. No. I'd stop that right away. Look, we're all here together. We all have a common goal. So leave that out of it, the childishness, the temper tantrums. Learn from that. And that way it also minimizes injury. So anyway, those are the things that I try to advocate to my students. And like this morning, Rafael's in Europe right now, so I taught his class for him. And so I enjoy teaching still. I'm doing a lot of seminars. Just taught a series of seminars the last couple of weeks, was in Denver, Cheyenne, Wyoming, and then went to Toronto. And so I love to help people and try to share, what I can.
Yeah, I love that. Train 50% for yourself and 50% for the other person. And with that attitude, you'll soon be one of the favorite training partners of everybody in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important that the other person's learning as well. So
yes,
you might be a more experienced person training with a newer person, but you might ask them, what are you working on? And maybe they're working on mount attacks. Well, then give them that mount opportunity a couple times while you're training.
Exactly.
Because they can't get there on their own. And
right.
that's a great attitude to have towards your training partners.
Yes.
I've had a blast talking with you. I've learned a lot about you and about some of your philosophy on the mat and off the mat. Do you have any final advice or anything you want to say to the audience?
Have fun. And if you, like I said earlier about the goals, setting goals for yourself, whatever they may be, maybe weight loss or getting better at a certain area or a certain part of your game. But, have fun with it. And, if you reach for the stars, at least you'll get to the mountaintop, And the other thing is, too, I know just from my own personal experience, we're always capable of doing more than what we think. And that's why I like to try to set those goals and try to push yourself more and more. A couple of years ago, I competed. It had been 15 years since I competed. And I remember, this is, I think, 3 years ago. And I jumped in and did the Master Senior Worlds. And I remember I'd been training so hard and doing a lot of cardio. And, I know it'd been 15 years. I knew my timing was off, and I knew, I wasn't as good. But I set that goal that my cardio would be superb. And so I was training every day really hard. And I remember I went against a gentleman, I forgot his name, and I'll never forget, he beat me. He beat me by 2 points. But when we got off the mat, he collapsed. He was so exhausted, he collapsed. and I thought, my goodness, this guy just beat me. But he's the one out on the floor, huffing and puffing, and I was dancing on my feet. I was like, man, I'm ready to go another round, So, hey, like I said earlier, you don't always win, but there has to be that personal vindication of, hey, I did my best. And even if I lost, I'm going to go out there on my shield and I'm going to give it my all. And some of the best times I've ever had when I was a kid, when I competed, was against, guys that I lost to, because, man, it was a great experience. I never gave up. I fought my heart out, and I felt like, what, if this guy ever sees me again, he's going to be hoping that he'll never have to go against me again, and then be friends and have that great, and that's the beauty too of jiu-jitsu. We're all, even though we may fly a different flag, we're all still part of a brotherhood. We share the same goals: sweat, and disappointment, and training, and injuries sometimes, and setbacks, and so it's a beautiful thing. It really is. My son was just in London, where he taught a seminar at Roger Gracie's. How awesome is that he can go to a guy that he's competed against before, and he's like opening up his school to him. So I think that's a beautiful thing about this sport that we do.
That is awesome, and it's great where the sport is at now.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for hopping on here with me, and I look forward to maybe getting you back on in the future.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Byron, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate this. This has been a real pleasure. I love sharing some of the old stories and talking about this. Thank you so much.
I want to thank Rafael Lovato Sr. for stopping by. If you haven't got the opportunity to check out the interview we had with his son, great, kind of cool to listen to those back to back or together. And man, what a team, a father-son team, and it's just I like the fact that they train together. Like they have a day that hey, this is our day to train. Let's do it, and that's just at one point it doesn't matter if you're doing like world-class jiu-jitsu. You're hanging out with your dad. You're hanging out with your son. You're having a good time. You're sharing a enjoyable art together. Man, that is a great relationship they have, and so glad he was willing to do an interview and bring his story to you guys.
Yep, and hey, also check out the interviews we've had with their other teammates from Oklahoma City. Justin Rader we've had on the show. We've had Jared Dopp on the show, and we've had Dallas Niles on the show. So definitely check that out. 5 interviews from people in the same gym. So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Man, I think they'd say that's a talent hotspot right there.
It's the definition of it.
Definitely. Daniel Coyle needs to go check out Oklahoma City and see what they got going in the water over there.
I think I mentioned it to him when I talked to him. I was like, hey, there's some, you can go to like the big jiu-jitsu places, and of course there's great jiu-jitsu there, but in Oklahoma City, okay, why is it there? What is happening? That's a mystery that somebody could look into and really figure out what they're doing differently. You could do the same thing with Absolute MMA in Australia. What are these guys doing to train all kind of isolated from the rest of the big jiu-jitsu world and come in and do really well in competition? It's amazing.
Yeah. Speaking of that school, we've had 2 guests from that place on there, Craig Jones and Lachlan Giles. So definitely check those 2 out there too.
With 253 episodes under our belt, we've got a lot of...
and the other thing is, like, what, you're talking about the talent code. Why is there such a strong podcast talent code in Wichita, Kansas? Like, what is it? What happened, Why is there such good podcasters there?
I don't know.
It's because of the Pod Squad. Yay, Pod Squad. Yay, us.
Crazy. Actually, I was lying about that part.
Something I'm not lying about is this.
Good segue.
Yeah. I'll put a link in the show notes. There's a website that has kind of rated the top 100 BJJ blogs and websites that you should go check out. And you know what, guys? We're on the list. We're ranked 22. And there are some big time.
The crazy thing is that is blogs and websites. It doesn't even talk about our podcast. When I first was reading it, I was like, this can't be right, because it said we frequency about 2 posts per week. I was like, Joe throws up 2 posts on our Facebook page a day, plus we have 5 podcasts a week. So I think they're talking just about just the Facebook page or the website of BjjBrick, and it says we have 4,022 Facebook fans. So let's try to get some more. If you tell all your friends about us, and let's try to get some more Facebook fans. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, tell them about to me, the podcast is where we get together and hang out every week, and that's where we want you to. That's where most people find us, and that's how most people connect and learn about jiu-jitsu. And it's cool to be on this list, because I've been using this list for quite a while to find articles, because we do an article every week, and sometimes it's the day before we're getting ready to do this. I'm like, I need to find an article. Go here, I'll scroll down a little bit, and let's check this website out, and open it up and see if they have anything written that we could talk about. And it's kind of cool to be represented on that list with everybody else. So we made it, gentlemen.
Yeah,
Top 25.
We do a lot of things. We do the Facebook page. We do the web page. Got other social media outlets, YouTube. But the podcast is our brick.
Oh, I like that, Joe.
It's what we do best, right?
It is, definitely.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was
But
just
that's pretty.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's pretty cool being number 22. But our goal is to just have fun and spread jiu-jitsu to everybody. And if we make it to number 1, that'd be cool. But, it's just we just want to spread jiu-jitsu and, get more and more people to train.
Yeah, I don't really think that the number on – it's kind of like a belt. It doesn't really mean anything as far as
well, it does to Joe and I. Byron basically is the guy who runs the BjjBrick Podcast. He's the one who owns it. And Joe and I, Byron brought us along for the ride. But, just like, football and basketball, college football, college basketball, they have the top 25 every year. And one thing that Joe or Byron didn't realize when he gave Joe and I a contract, it actually says in the contract, if we're ever ranked in the top 25, ever in the top 25, Byron and I are getting a raise, or Joe and I get a raise. So, Byron, me and Joe would like to bring that to attention, and we would like to.
I will double it,
to
Gary.
get our paycheck. And one thing about this podcast, like Joe and I always say, we get paid weekly, very weekly, WEAKLY.
But now we're going to be getting twice as much, so I'm stoked.
Me too. Thank you, Byron.
Well, yeah, I'll double the week. Gary, he was talking about his weak side a week or two ago, and that's a confusing sentence. And then it's good to switch to different sides, and maybe someday, Gary, you'll get a good side.
Someday, that's my goal. But I do. The one thing I do have is I leak better on my left side, so I do something.
See, I thought, okay, now you're bringing it above the waistline.
Wait, no,
side to
I leak better on the front side than the back side.
Wow.
But give me a couple more years.
Yeah.
I'll catch up.
So
a prison.
I don't remember you saying it last week or so. Which side is your good side? Are you right-handed or left-handed, Gary?
Byron, I have all my sides are good side.
Oh, his side's a good side.
Yep.
Okay.
At least that's what my mom tells me.
You got some good sides there, Gary. But if all your sides are good, none of them are actually that great.
I'm going to have to go to my safe space.
Well, I mentioned that we pull articles from this website from time to time, and it's just a nice resource. So go check it out. We'll put a link in the show notes to the big list of jiu-jitsu websites. And speaking of which, we have an article this week, guys. It's from John Will's blog. Man, what a great resource this blog is.
I think it might be the shortest article that we've discussed yet. But like Gary said a week or two ago, size don't matter. So actually, I really like this. In fact, guys, if you don't mind, I'll just read the whole article since it's short enough, and then we can talk about it. He starts out with a couple of statements. Just take a single step. Just lose a single kilo. Just save $100. Just read one page. Just do 5 push-ups. And then he continues and says, doing just a little is infinitely better than doing nothing. We achieve things by taking that small initial step and then repeating it. Having an all or nothing mindset serves only to shackle us. I used to have this mindset myself, and it really held me back. Just do a little. It often leads to a lot. So that's a short article, but it's so concise, and it couldn't be more true. Being afraid to take that first step holds many people back. Just think about all of the people that have driven by jiu-jitsu gyms and thought, I would love to do that, and have never stepped on the mat. So I really like this. I think we've all been there, Gary. I think every one of us. I mean, I've gone traveling and brought gear with me, and then sort of wimp out at the last minute and come up with excuses. I'm busy. I got too much to do. But really, it's just that taking that initial step to get through the door. So yep. I like the article. I appreciate him having it on here for us.
Yeah, I love the part he talks about having an all or nothing mindset only shackles us. And he talks about how it holds us back. And I think about people who want to lose weight. They always want to lose 50 pounds. You never just hear somebody like John talks about just lose a single kilo. And, it's that all or nothing mindset. I'm going to lose 50 pounds. And the first week goes by and they lose 4 pounds, which is great. Probably more than you should lose in a week. But then they don't think it's enough. and they get down, and next thing you know, they're done with it. Where it's that all or nothing mindset. I got to get to it, as quick as possible, and just got to lose so much. And I even think about my buddy Byron here. Byron, just do 5 push-ups. Byron, he couldn't even do a push-up over 3 months ago. And he just started doing 1 push-up, and he had to start from his knees. But the guy can now do 2 regular push-ups. And, I mean, he's been doing it for 3 months now. And, it just took him to start. And he's moving up. And I guarantee you within the next year or 2, he'll be up to 5 push-ups.
Yeah. A time that I actually used this, and before I read this, was... I'm training to compete in a what's it called, a relay triathlon, where I'm going to swim, my wife is going to bike, and then I'm going to jog. I'd say run, but I'm going to jog. And so the swimming part, I talked about this a couple weeks ago or last week, but I can swim. I'm fine in the water. But to swim at distance is nothing I've done. I've always just played in the water. Dunk each other and choke each other and heel hook each other in the water. That's what I do in the water. But to actually try to go from back and forth or swim a quarter mile, man, talk about a tough thing that I wasn't ready for. I got in the pool at the Y. I mentioned this before, but I couldn't swim 25 meters. And I had to swim 400 meters. I was exhausted. And so I told myself, okay, most of this is technique. I'm not in that bad of shape. I have to learn the technique, and let's just swim 25 meters. And then let's just swim 50 meters the next day, and just take it at little chunks at a time. And now I'm quite comfortable, and I'm confident I can swim the distance. And likely I will not drown next weekend when I try to do this event. I'm hoping. So the podcast might end next weekend if I do drown.
Yeah, if we don't have an episode next weekend, you know why.
Yep.
So Byron, just to back up a minute, when you're doing your choking and your heel hooking and your, how long does it usually take for you to get kicked out of the kiddie pool?
Yeah, pretty quick, but it's usually so chaotic as far as all the splashing goes that they don't understand that there's an adult in the water. And that kind of helps me, delay it a little bit. But yeah.
And the thing is, Byron actually swims in spats and a no-gi rash guard. You actually think one of those lifeguards is going to have enough guts to kick Byron out? It's a tap-out rash guard. They're not going to mess with that guy. I mean, the guy does... not only does the guy dress like that, he does 2 push-ups.
and the water around me is more yellow than any of the other yellow water in the whole pool.
Leakage.
Man, I throw this little joke about leakage at the beginning, and Gary has been running with it the whole episode. That's been great.
Jogging, Byron. Jogging.
If you run, you might leak a little bit.
Yeah.
But
then I'd slip. And I'd break an ankle. And then who knows? I could fall on my eyebrow and have a little leakage of blood right there. So you never know.
Man. I feel like we've deviated slightly from the article. But, Gary, leak a little bit
Article's
less,
great.
Each time.
Yeah, definitely just take that first step. That's all we have to do. And, don't have that all or nothing attitude. Just go in, take that first step, just lose that 1 pound, just, do those 5 push-ups, just walk into that jiu-jitsu gym the first time and just go from there.
Yeah.
Get a little bit better every time.
The weight loss one, I think we could dig a little deeper in that. He's like, just lose a kilo. It could be just eat healthy right now. A big one for me is just shop healthy right now. Like I'm at the store, buy healthy food right now, and then that have a trickle down effect as far as the meals I prepare for myself later on are more healthy if I'm able to get myself to shop healthy right now. And I'll buy junk food next time, but right now I'm going to buy healthy food.
I always like the people that's like, hey, I'm going to lose weight starting on the 1st. Let's just start today.
Yeah.
It's Monday. I'm going to start next Sunday. Let's just start today.
And then you're
that farther ahead.
What John's saying is they go like 110% on the 1st, and by the 3rd, they're done.
Yeah.
Just do little steps. You'll get there. Have a healthier breakfast. Have a healthy lunch. Have your normal dinner. And then after a while, phase into a more healthy dinner. And it's easier. It's a more long-term attainable thing if you could change your lifestyle. It takes about a month or so to make an actual change in your habit. Man, such a little article that has sparked a good conversation, gentlemen.
Yeah, it was a great article.
Definitely check out John Will's blog. We have a link to it on the show notes, but there's so much good stuff on there. We've pulled stuff from John Link's blog numerous times on here, and also we've had him on the show. As Byron said earlier, we've had 253 episodes, so we've had a lot of people on the show.
Had him on
John Will.
Times.
Yeah, John Will's a legend. Definitely check him out.
I'd like to thank a couple of legends here. Trip,
Yeah,
Caleb,
you're
and
welcome,
Rob. Good try, Gary. What Trip, Caleb, and Rob are doing is they're Patreon supporters. And they heard the show, most likely, and said, hey, I want to help these guys out and help them do the best possible podcast they could make and keep this show going strong. And we are looking to make this a better show, and we're also wanting to make this more stable. And what you could do is donate $1 per episode on Patreon, or even a few people do even more, which is phenomenal. And we'll send you out a 5-inch BjjBrick gi patch, a BjjBrick sticker. You're cordially invited to join the Facebook group, the private Facebook group, and you got to send me an email at bjjbrick@gmail.com if you want to join that and you're a Patreon supporter. That way I could send me a link to your Facebook page. I'll add you that way. And for a limited time only, we still have a few of those pictures left of Gary that he's autographed, that he famously had to sign in episode 250. A few of those. And Gary's not a guy who would promote himself in such a fashion. That's why it's funny.
I'll give it to you guys. Watch our YouTube episode, and they actually spring that on me that they've made some postcards with my picture on it, and I have to give it to them. That was a pretty good joke. Yep.
And you even showed them to your wife, didn't you, or some of your family members?
Yeah, I actually asked if I could take a couple for myself to show them to my wife, and she actually sent a picture to my dad, and he thought that was cool, which kind of ridiculous, but okay.
That's how you know you're cool, Gary.
Hey, Gary.
Yes, Joe.
GQ magazine called.
They definitely don't want me.
They said no thanks.
They said to stop sending in submissions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're like, and how come these pictures are wet? Looks like a little leakage.
That brings us to our audiobook this week that is secretly in the works at the BjjBrick Podcast studio, and it could be all of us. We're really teamed up with Gary here mostly. He's writing Leaky Jiu-Jitsu and other surprises you'll find on the mat. And it's just a collection of odd stories and a little bit of strategy. Gary, Joe, this has been quite the team effort of all of us. But the chapters on disguising your leaks and blaming them on other things have really helped me just a lot on the mats.
Well, like you said, disguising your leaks. That's definitely one thing you want to do because it can get pretty embarrassing and you can be the butt, no pun intended, of all the jokes there. So one thing I do, and I've been doing this for a long time, is I always bring a big, clear gallon, the big milk jugs, but I rinse it out and I fill it with lemonade, and I bring that to every class. And every time there's a leakage on the mat, I just pretend like some of my lemonade spilled. Even if I haven't had the lemonade jug on the mat, people think that maybe he had it on the mat. They don't know. So I just kind of always blame it on, I spilled some lemonade. And what I do to make it even more realistic is I scoop it up into a cup and I'll drink it at that point. And that way they have no clue that it really was not lemonade. Wow. And it's a good way to hide it.
And Joe is our more, fashion-forward person of the podcast, and he's really taken it upon himself. You see, gis in all different shapes and colors and designs. I've never seen anybody but Joe wear a yellow gi, and it's starting to make sense. It didn't start out yellow.
No, it didn't start out yellow.
Yeah, you guys think it's tie-dyed, but that's not exactly how things came into play. Yellow in the front, brown in the back. So I got it all covered.
Oh man! But this will be. Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, another thing is what I have done also is we started a new gi, not just the color Joe was talking about, but there's a super absorbent gi, and basically it's made out of like paper towel material. And even what happens if you do leakage on the mat, you just shrimp over it. And I mean, it'll take up a big spill. I mean, the spill, it takes up so much spill that when you shrimp over it, it's totally clean. And on top of that, it cleans the mats at the same time. But this material is such a I can't even say the damn word. You know what I'm talking about, Byron?
And this part of the episode has been brought to you by Bounty, the quicker picker upper.
But, this material is, we have patented it, but we're getting a lot of companies like Exxon actually wants to buy our material. So if they have any oil spills, I mean, that's how good this stuff has worked.
Yeah.
And, personally, I think I might make a lot of money with it. But, like Joe said, we Bounty definitely helped us out with it. The quicker picker upper.
Yep. If you're not going to pick somebody up and finish a takedown, you might as well pick up some liquid with Bounty.
Yep. Yep.
But look for the link in the show notes to Bounty, and that's how you know that what we're talking about is real.
And next week, listen to our podcast about how Bounty is suing us.
Oh, man. We didn't really introduce that segment. That's our fake audiobook that we like to work on at the end of the show, just kind of cut loose and have a good time and not cut loose too much, right, Gary and Joe?
I've already been cutting loose all day, like you were in different rooms.
Gary talked about next week we're getting sued. That might happen if I don't drown first. But if that doesn't happen, if I don't drown and we don't get sued by Bounty, we have Tyson Kilby. He is a lieutenant with the sheriff's office, and he's written a book called Fundamental Handgun Mastery. Tyson is also a jiu-jitsu guy. He's a brown belt, and so we talk a little bit about firearms and safety with that. We talk a lot about jiu-jitsu and some of his experience in jiu-jitsu and law enforcement is always an interesting topic to me. And just a great conversation that's coming at you next week. Had a good time this week, guys, and looking forward to next week.
Definitely looking forward to next week. And Byron, remember, floaties. Floaties the key word. I hope you don't drown because Joe and I want to double our weekly paycheck.
All right, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Train hard, train smart, get better. We'll see you on the mats.
Leak less.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.